All right. Today's workshop, as I mentioned earlier, is going to have to do with water soluble pastels. These are dry pastels. It's a particular brand. I'm going to show you a couple of other brands of soft pastels that are similar to this, but this particular brand, Charvin, is it has in the dry pastel sticks some sort of water soluble binder. So like a what's it called? Like a gum arabic. That's I watched the video from Jerry's Artarama on YouTube where they went through a whole project using these sticks that are water soluble. But all pastel sticks are water soluble. The difference is how does it grip to your surface? So if you're using watercolor paper, how does that wet pigment grip to your surface? And it grips more like a mixed media paint than it does a dry pastel. So I'll be showing you that as we go through the workshop. Let me show you some inspiration and some references. You know, I always like to give you some references. So this is the artwork, very impressionistic. This was Emmy from Jerry's Artarama. This was their episode number, so you can see it right there if you want to take a screenshot. And it was using the Charvin, as I just showed you, the Charvin water-soluble pastels. Isn't that gorgeous? Oh, she's such a cool artist. And so this is very impressionistic, and she was inspired by Monet's water lilies. Besides her, another artist that I'm very inspired by is Vivian Gonzalez. Is it Vivi? Vivi Gonzalez, yes. Vivi Gonzalez art on Instagram. And what I love is that in her sketchbook, she does a lot of exploration and she will pick a color palette. So you see the colors down the side here. She will pick a color palette so that it limits her colors that she's working with. And then she will make a piece of artwork based upon this color palette to show the possibilities. She normally will do a flower and then she'll do some other sort of scene using her selected color palette. I highly recommend. There you go. There, you can probably see that better there. Now, when I save the video after we're done to YouTube, I will be putting the links to the Jerry's Artarama video as well as to the Instagram for Vivi Gonzalez in the description, so you can always go back and find it. And I highly recommend that you go follow the artists that I share with you because they're amazing. Now let's look at some books that I recommend if you're going to do any sort of pastel. Now I'm going to show you the mixed media aspect of these Charvin pastels, but in fact they are pastels. So here is the, in my opinion, the best basic book. If you want to get one book about pastels to introduce yourself and get your feet wet, this is the best one, in my opinion. All about pastel. And I think that says Barons, right? Yeah, Barons. And again, when I save the video to YouTube, I will put a link to these books. I'm going to share with you two books. So this one, all about pastel. What does that say in the middle? Oh, techniques in pastel. Amazing book. Amazing, amazing, amazing. That, you know, as artists, we're very visual, right? I want to see, I want lots of beautiful color pictures. So here is an example of a page from the book. And what I love about this page in particular is they're showing you one color of pastel, but they're showing you how it looks on different color backgrounds, because you can paint with pastels on various backgrounds and get different effects. So I've not seen that in another book. It probably is out there, but I've not seen it. And then the basic techniques of hatching, cross hatching, blending. I mean, it is all in here. If you get this book, You're going to love it. And that's if you want to dip your toes and get your feet wet with pastels. Now, most of the time, I like to do abstract work. I mean, you wouldn't realize it seeing this piece right back here with the frangipani flowers, which I love because my parents lived in Hawaii and I visited them, and there were frangipani everywhere and they smell amazing. Some people call it plumeria also. Well, most of the time, I like to do mixed media type and abstract artwork. Here is a book called Abstract Art Painting, and it's saying mixed expressive mixed media or expressions in mixed media. Yeah, expressions in mixed media. The author here is Deborah, Debora Stewart, Deborah Stewart. And what I love is that she shows you in this book, her basis is pastels. That's her main medium that she uses. But I love that she shows you some mixed media approaches to how to use your pastels. So there's an example of one of her abstract artworks. So if you're attracted to abstract artworks, then this is an excellent book that I highly recommend. And it does use, she may use mixed media to create a background, and then she comes on top with expressive marks like this to create her finish work using the pastels. And so that's why I love that book, because I'm a mixed media artist at heart, but I love my pastels. Both dry pastels and oil pastels I enjoy working with. And so this week we're focusing on water soluble dry pastels. Next week, we're going to look at, during my class next week, we're going to look at the oil pastels. So this is an example of a water-soluble oil pastel that we're going to be using next week. So if you haven't bookmarked it yet on Whatnot, I suggest that you bookmark that class. All right, let's talk about some of the supplies that we use when we are doing pastel work. Of course, we're going to have some sort of substrate to put it on. That means most of the time it's paper that you put pastel on. And then you're going to frame that pastel, because pastels are a little bit delicate when they're done. You can't do this. Like, see, this is oil paint that's dried. So I can touch it, right? This is acrylic paint and resin over here. I can touch it. You can't run your hand over a pastel painting when you're done with it. You're going to have to put it behind glass. You don't want people touching it, because the dust from it is going to get damaged if you run your hand over the painting. And as a matter of fact, let me see, I think I have, where is it? Where is it? I have a piece here that I can run my hand over so you can see what I'm talking about. This is just putting down some color. And if I run my hand over it, there you go, there's color right there. So that is why they're a little more delicate, and generally you work on paper, and then you take that paper and you mount it inside a frame behind glass. Now, you don't put it directly up against your mat. You see how you have a mat here, and the mat has this little edging on it right there? If you put a pastel right here, as that pastel gets jostled around, dust is going to fall down, and you're going to see it on this little white part right here. So what most people do is they mount the pastel work, instead of having the little bevel going this way, they turn it around like that, so that the bevel is on the inside. And that means if any dust falls down, it gets caught in the bevel behind where somebody's looking at the artwork. That's just a very simplified version of how you can mount your pastel paintings to be sure that the dust doesn't fall down and show. And there are a lot of videos out on YouTube on how to do that with different ideas. You can put a spacer bar in your frame, or just take it to a professional framer, right? That's what I've done. I usually spend several $100s to do a large pastel painting with a framer because they're going to do it professionally and they're going to give that little space in between the artwork and the front of the frame so that any dust that falls down will fall down inside there. All right, now what kind of paper do we want to use when we're working with pastels? There are a lot of different options. These are the options you don't want. Okay, first I'm going to show you the two options that you don't want. This is watercolor paper. It's called hot press, and hot press watercolor paper is smooth. So I don't want to do a pastel artwork on smooth paper. I need something with a little bit of what's called tooth or grit in order for the pastel to get down in the nooks and crannies. And so we don't want to use a hot press paper. This is a very good quality watercolor paper, but it's called hot press and it's very smooth. Sometimes it's called a vellum finish, which is that smooth finish. So we don't want a smooth finish if we're going to be doing work with pastels. Here's another one. Oh, this is gorgeous paper. It's actually by the same company that I just showed you, Fabriano, but it's their black drawing paper. See that you see the Fabriano there. It's black drawing paper. So if you see sketch paper or drawing paper, that's also generally not going to work because what? It's super smooth. So I don't want to do my pastel work on something like this because you'll put your pastel on and because it's gritty, it will just fall right off. There's not much for it to grip onto with a smooth paper. So instead, another option is, and I show you this paper all the time because it's my favorite for just about everything, and that is the Canson XL watercolor paper. 140 pound, which is a nice heavy paper right here. And it is called cold press watercolor paper. So there are two types of watercolor paper that have texture to them. There's cold press, and that's what this is. So there's a light texture on the paper here, which helps to grip. It has that little bit of toothiness that helps to grip the pastel. The other type of watercolor paper is called rough. And so you can imagine a rough watercolor paper has a lot of texture as well, which will hold on to the pastel. Now, those are, and this is typically what I use for just about everything. And I actually started a project using that paper for today so that I'll be able to show you, because these are mixed media and they are wettable, they work well on that Canson XL watercolor paper. But if you're going to be doing any other kind of pastel, and so besides the Charvin water-soluble pastel, I have a few other pastels here to show you to describe the difference between them. And so those other pastels are going to want a pastel paper. This is an inexpensive pastel paper by Canson. I don't know how you say that word, but there you go. And it does say pastel on it very clearly. They come in white, as well as this is a pad that has multiple colors in it. Oh, did you see that? That was a practice sheet where I was practicing on the color with some new pastels that I had received. So this is a very economical, excellent paper for you to purchase if you're going to experiment with pastels. It's great for sketching with pastels also. Now, this is an inexpensive pastel paper, and it says multicolor pastel paper. It's beautiful. It has beautiful rough edges to it. So you see how those are called decal edges. So you see these really rough edges. I love that. That's a handmade paper, but it is not good for pastel, even though it says it's made for pastel. And I'll show you why in just a minute. But there is a way to fix this paper so that it will do well for pastel, and I'm going to show you that in just a few moments. The next type of paper is very common with artists that are focusing on pastel, and that's called sanded paper. So see where it says premium sanded paper, pastel paper, and it's actually sandpaper. So do you see here where it says 600? So sandpapers come in different grits from around 180 is a very heavy, grainy grit up through whatever, 1200 and even higher. And so this is a 600 grit. And let me see, can you hear that? So this is your 600 grit. And this is some of my pastels on the 600 grit here. And it's it's not your average sandpaper. This is a specialty sandpaper that is made just for pastels, that is acid free and archival. So that's why if you wanted to practice, you could pick up any kind of high grit like this, 600, 800, 1000 um, of your wettable. I would say get the type of sandpaper that you can wet. But this company called UArt is an excellent company for their papers. Their sanded pastel paper is beautiful. All right, and remember what I said Canson earlier? So the Canson booklet that I showed you earlier, it has the same name here, but this is kind of their sketch version of the paper right here. So that would be something that you would get in order to play. It's inexpensive. Here's a more expensive paper from Canson, also in the same line, but this is called this is a sanded paper. So it says here, fine sanded card. So that means there's a little more grit to the surface. And let me show you a sheet here. These are beautiful. You see how they have the white edge here? And then right here, it's very, very textured in there. It's about the same as that 600 or maybe a 400 grit sandpaper. And then this particular pack has different colors in it. So there's the gray, and here is a brown. So remember how I said that that books showed you the same color but against different backgrounds? So a lot of pastel people that do pastels love to use these colored papers, and this one in particular, it creates beautiful finished artwork. So if you've played around and worked out your ideas here on this more or less expensive sketchy paper, when you feel like you're ready to do your final artwork, then you grab one of the sanded papers from UArt or something like this that has more color options to it and go to town. All right. And the most expensive one that I have is by a company that makes pastels. They make other paint as well, but let me show you their pastels. You may have seen them if you've been in an art store. This is Sennelier from France, and they make beautiful pastels. I have lots of them. This is what they would call their demi pastel or small pastel stick set. This is what I use if I'm going to travel somewhere and I want to have some pastels with me, because check this out. They're so cute. See how small they are? There's my finger. You can kind of get an idea of how big they are from my finger. And there's a nice range of colors in here for you to be able to do anything, whatever you want. So these tend to be an expensive brand of pastels, and they have their special pastel paper that they make, and they call it pastel card. Pastel card. And so this is a book of their pastel card. And what you're going to notice is that it is a sanded paper. Oops, there's the cover. It's your high quality papers come with a nice acid free cover. So as you're working with it, let me go to the next page so you can see. Well, so that as you're working with it, you tear out your card. But notice that all the card is, well, they're slightly different colors. Let me get this back out again. So here's kind of a beach sandy color, and it's very highly textured here. Very high, beautiful texture. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Usually when I work on a pastel, I do 10 to 15 coats of pastel in different layers. And so I need a paper like this that has a lot of grit to it. So that was the lighter beach color. Here's a little bit darker, kind of richer coffee color. And then let's see, here's a green, like a moss green color. So these are different. Ooh, there's a charcoal dark color. So it's beautiful the way that pastels sit on top of these surfaces, and they can create beautiful play between those dramatic dark backgrounds and the chalky light colors of the pastels on top. But that's for another show, right? Going, for us to talk about the dry pastels like that. Now, you can make your own pastel paper just by using that watercolor paper, the Canson watercolor here. So if I take the Canson watercolor and I want the surface to have a little more grit, like I want to do a professional finished piece of artwork on this beautiful watercolor paper, then I can put what's called a pastel ground on here. That means I can paint an acrylic emulsion on here that is specifically made to create a perfect background for pastels. And so there are two companies that I buy their pastel grounds. This is Golden, so it says pastel ground, and then this is Spectrafix, or I'm sorry, Art Spectrum, and they're from, I believe, Australia. I don't think it says on here. Australia, it does. But these are very easy to get. They're readily available in the United States. I'm not sure about Canada, but I do know in the United States it's very easy for us to get these. And the interesting thing is you can tint these. They are an acrylic base, but they have grit inside them so that they will make your surface grippy, and they work perfectly on top of this heavy watercolor paper. Whoop, whoop. So you can take an inexpensive paper and just coat it with these grounds. Now, this Art Spectrum comes in multiple colors too. Remember how I showed you those fancy pastel papers had multiple colors to them? Well, you can tint this clear version, or you can buy the Art Spectrum in different colors. They do offer this pastel ground in different colors. But if you wanted to just throw a tiny bit of tint in with this golden only has the clear, and if you wanted to throw a little bit of color in with it, it's very easy to use a little tiny touch of acrylic color and put it in with your primer. So this is what the primer looks like. It has a bit of a creamy color to it, and this is on a really good, this is actually hot press paper, but I wanted to make it have grip, so I used the primer on it. And you can see it has a little bit of a putty color, but it also, you can hear the sanded surface that it gives it. It's awesome. It's awesome. Now this is where I took some acrylic paint and I added a color to the pastel ground, and then now I have a tinted background, and I just made it on watercolor paper. So cool that you can do that. And here's a kind of an orange background. Here's a dramatic blue background. A lot of artists enjoy working with an interesting colored background to build their pastel paintings on top of. It's really fun. And then I had mentioned about this special paper that I said, it says it's pastel paper, but what happens is as you're putting layers of pastel on it, the paper starts to bead up, and I'm going to show you that because this is a handmade paper. See, it says handmade on it. This is also a handmade paper. It has that decollage all around. And as I was using it, I don't know if you can see here, but the paper starts to pill. That's called pilling. Whereas you're scrubbing in with multiple layers, the paper wants to begin to lift up like this. So let me see if I turn it to the side or like this, if you can see it a little better. It came out, the picture came out and it was fine. It's just if you were looking at the surface with your eyes, you would see that there's some fuzz on here where the paper started to come up. And that's exactly what would happen if you use this handmade paper pack as well. But because we can use these grounds on top of all different kinds of papers, what I've done is I took one of these papers that has the beautiful decal edges handmade and I added to the surface of it. So now you can hear it has some tooth to it. And now I can work on top of this. I put two coats, so I put one coat going in one direction, and then I put a second coat going in the other direction. And that way it covered all of the paper. It soaked into all of the paper, and now this paper is ready to receive some of that pastel without having that same problem of it pilling. And that is the trick. If you do find paper that you love that you want to work on, just get one of these clear primers for your surface and to create that pastel ground, and then you can work on top of it. Now it does change the color just slightly, so it's got that. Remember I showed you it has that tiny bit of a putty color to it, like this. So there's the white side and there's the putty side. So they call it clear, but it does have just a little bit of that putty effect to it. But it's pretty much the same color, barely changes the color like that of that special paper. So I love it. We're gonna play with this when we get over top of the table. All right, let me get rid of all of these papers here. Whoa, I'm surrounded by beautiful paper. Now let's talk about some of the other tools that we'll be using. Oh, let me move that out of the way. And to sketch out your design, if you want to sketch out your design, this is something that I got from Critter Chops on Whatnot. Hey, Mark Dietz. Mark Dietz says hi over on YouTube. Hello, hello. Somebody who shares my last name but is not a family member. Isn't that cool? So this is the Forever pen, they call it. It has an interesting tip to it that's not graphite. It's something else, but it looks like graphite. And what I like about using this Forever pen to create my sketch is that it gives you a light line. So if I just have a little piece of, here's a little piece of scrap watercolor paper, and I'm going to make a line on it of graphite. So if I don't put as much pressure on it, I get a very light line, and that's what I like to use to create my sketch. I sort of, instead of holding it like a pencil, I hold it like an artist. So I grip it in a different way, and then that way I can lightly sketch in my design before I go on top of it with whatever I'm doing. If it's watercolor, acrylics, anything, this is a great pencil that's going to last a long time and give you either a light line if that's what you want, or a darker line if that's what you want. And of course you can write with it too. Hey there, creativeness on Whatnot. Welcome in, welcome in. Now, some people prefer a bolder line when they're working, and when I do my own excuse me, when I do my own pastel work where I'm going to put those 15 layers on, then I generally start with some charcoal. So this is charcoal press, what's called compressed charcoal, in pencil form from Artist Loft. And I love it because there's a soft, a medium, and a hard. So the hard gives you, they're all going to give you a pretty dark line. So there's the hard. And then let me go all the way to the soft. And in this set, the soft one is worn down the most because that's the one that I prefer. So here is the soft. And there's a slight difference between this one and this one in terms of how dark they are. You know, they're pretty close, but my preference most of the time is to use the soft one, because then I'm going to come in with a different tool like this, which is called a blending stump, and I'm usually blending it, and the soft one gives you more blendability than naturally than the hard one does. So you see how I blended some of that, and that's using the blending stump, which we also use with pastels. Then you may want to use graphite. And, you know, this was not graphite, but it looks like a graphite pencil. But this is the kind of graphite pencils that I like to use because they're big and they're chunky, and I like the feel of, again, not holding it like a pencil, but holding it like an artist. And then doing my, see how I'm holding it loosely? It's like I'm having a cup of tea, right? Like that. I have my fingers up. And then you use this, and that will give you a, a lighter a lighter feel and a little more loose feel. So if you're looking to get more loose in your artwork, try this, holding your writing instruments and using a very light touch with it in order to do your line work. And then I showed you the charcoal pencils, but you can also get vine charcoal. So see where this says willow charcoal or vine charcoal, it's called. And so I like when they come in these hard cases because it protects the charcoal. And here's a big piece of charcoal here. Christina, why are you showing us charcoal? Well, because often I use charcoal to do my initial outlines, as I was saying, or just to put down, if I'm doing abstract, like I was showing you in that book, right? So you see the abstract here. If you look closely, back in the background here, there's a bunch of black. There's some black lines. Well, those black lines were put in with charcoal. And usually I start with charcoal and then I end with charcoal when I do my pastel work. And it just helps to give me those darkest darks. And that's why I wanted to show you the charcoal. This is another one. Now, charcoal comes in different sizes. So you saw the skinny one, and then the big fat one, and then this is a medium size stick of charcoal. So there we go. You get, when you're holding it like this as a vine charcoal, you can get down a lot. Let's see, I'm not even looking at it. So that's how a lot of my artwork start or end, with a piece of charcoal. And if you don't want to get your fingers dirty, like I'm already starting to get my fingers dirty, you can purchase a holder, a holder for charcoal or a holder for pastels. This happens to be a square holder. So do you see the square right there? And this is square instead of round. And I got this from Critter Chops on Whatnot. So if you don't follow Critter Chops, go follow him. That's Critter, Critter, Chops, Chops. And so I'm able to hold these blocks, and then I can hold it like this and work with it and not get it all over my hands if you prefer to do that. Now, we're also going to need something called a kneaded eraser. When you're working with pastels, you need a kneaded eraser. And a kneaded eraser is not the same as your normal eraser. So there's a regular eraser, right? A kneaded eraser is a putty. And so what you're going to be doing is, if I take the putty and the charcoal is here, and I pick up, you see how I picked up some of the charcoal on the kneaded eraser? Well, if I go and I put it back down on my piece, I'm going to leave a little bit of residue. So there's some residue of it there. So what you do is, after you pick something up, you just knead that right into the eraser. Now, I saw a video on YouTube where somebody showed how, once this kneaded eraser has a lot of pigment in it, how you can clean it. I was like, I had no idea you could clean a kneaded eraser, but I have lots of kneaded erasers around my studio. This is one from Dick Blick, like that. That's a nice big one. Depends on what size you're working on, but definitely a must have if you're working with any kind of pastel. And then it helps to have sandpaper. So here's this is just regular sandpaper. This is a what, 220 grit, okay? Or when you buy a set that has these blending stumps in it, often it'll have a little paddle in it, and that paddle has this kind of sandpaper on it. And you might think, what the heck is that for? Well, check out this big paddle that I have by a very famous charcoal company called Nitram. Oh, they make beautiful charcoal. Look at this paddle, big one. And this is, again, sandpaper. And you can see where I was sanding some of my pastel. Why would I do that? Sometimes when you're, see how this graphite is not at a point anymore? It's very rounded and soft. If I want it at a point, and that's whether I'm working with graphite, whether I'm working with charcoal, whether I'm working with pastel, if I want it to be at a point, I can use this paddle and rub on here and get my point. And that's what some people do when they want to have a fine point. Can you see that? Let me put it right up there. Maybe you can see it. Now I have a fine point on that piece of charcoal, and I can go in and put in details. So if you're a detail person, which I'm not, then you can use that technique with some sort of sandpaper or paddle to sharpen and get the shape that you want. Let me put this one away. But I love this paddle. As you can see, I keep it folded up in its case to protect it because it's fantastic. Okay, then you're going to want to use brushes with the technique that we're doing because we're doing mixed media and we're going to be using water with these pastels. So here is, I just use a Taklon. This is a synthetic nylon Taklon brush of all different sizes like this. So any brushes that you might have on hand. I sometimes for blending, besides a blending stump, if I'm working in a larger area, I'll just use a makeup sponge. So you can buy these big bags of makeup sponges like this and just use your makeup sponge. Then there are specialty tools, and these are called soft tools, and they have changeable tips. So you see the red on there? That's what I was using on that apple. And then, did I show you the apple? Yes. This was the apple that I was saying it was pilling a little bit here, but I was using this tool to go in because often you put down your pastel and then you want to smooth it around before you put your next layer on. So these soft tools that have different shaped tips, you see how this one has a really narrow tip and this one has a rounded tip. So you can buy packs of these and then you can buy the replacement tips. These are phenomenal for doing work with pastels. And on my website, so if you're not familiar with that, on my website here, deetsart.com, there is a page that says supply links. So if you are looking for things like the soft tools, there are links to the soft tools in there in the supply links page. Now, when you're on the supply links page, you'll notice I have a title for the top for the what it is that you're looking at, soft tools for pastel. And then underneath it is a picture. What you want to do is click on the words above the picture and that will take you to where you can find those products online. And then there is this special palette. There's only one company that I know of that makes this palette, and this is called a mixing palette. And it's smooth on this side and rough on this side. So I'll show you how we're going to use that. But this is a very special palette from the company called Caran d'Ache that makes different types of pastels and other media. And that's going to come in handy when we're working on it. All right, let's see what else I might want to show you. Okay, the rest of what I need to show you is going to be over top of the table. Oh, with one exception, here you go. This is called a chamois. Often when you order or when you purchase a set that has these blending stumps and it'll have the little paddle for the sandpaper, often you get a chamois with it as well. And the nice thing about a chamois is that once it gets all dirty, you can wash it. So it's renewable, right? Wash, wash, wash. You just throw it in with your wash. You can see here I have some of what I was working on with it, and it's very soft and very nice for working in. Some people just, you want your finger in there instead of a tool in there. I often just want to stick my finger in it. So this is a very nice cloth to help with when you need to blend items. And so that often will come, you'll see that often in a set. All right, let's go over top of the table. Hold on a second. Let me see if there's anything else I want to show you. Let me just show you real quick this. You might have seen this in the picture for this workshop. This is done with the Charvin soft pastels, and this is actually done on pastel paper. So here it says, this is by Hanamula, and it is pastel sketch paper. Hello, hello. Ooh, a whole bunch of people just jumped in. Did you all come from a raid? If so, thank you and welcome in, welcome in. So this is a special paper from Hanamula, which is it's a beautiful white paper. And that is what I did this piece on because I love the brightness of the colors against that white background. So nice. All right, let's get this paper right here, and we're going to go over top of the table and get started with painting. Okay. Now you'll notice here that I have some water and I have a few brushes. That's what I was using when I painted this one, the hibiscus. I used the water because now you can use water with any, you know what, I'm going to start out by using just a piece of this paper here. This is the pastel sketch paper from Hanamula, okay? And I want to use the bright white so you can see the difference here. So when I use the Charvin, any pastels you can use with water. Any pastels you can use with water. Here's the interesting thing about the Charvin. When you pull them out, here they are. Oh, and there are actually 48 in here. So this is the top tray, and then there's also a bottom tray. And you can see here, bloop, I have swatched out all of my colors. When I do my swatching, I do a line, and then I add water just to half of it. And that way I can see what the effect is with water on it and not with water on it. And they pretty much keep their color beautifully, even when you put water on them. So there's a little bit of gum arabic in here, which is what makes them a beautiful mixed media water soluble type product. Okay, here we go. So there's one tray. And what I like to do when I'm working is, there's the second tray, is I will put another tray in here. And then that way I have my two trays and they're both protected as I'm working with them. Okay, they're in this nice, the nice lid. And then I keep this handy as well as a reference for exactly what the colors are. Because what I've done, let me see, is this the right way? Yes and no. Okay, so what I've done is this row right here is this row right here. This row here is this row, with the exception of there was one switched here, but I know what it was. And then over here, I did the same thing. So I went this way here, and then this way here. And if you do that and you keep them you put them in the order that you like to work in, and then you make your swatch card in that same order, it'll be very easy for you to find where the color is that you want to work with next. So that is what the Charvin look like in their box. Now these, again, have a little bit of the gum arabic in them so that they act like watercolor when they're wet. So let me take this color here. Oh, you know what? I need to open one of the other ones and we'll get comparable colors. We'll get the same colors. So this is a semi-hard pastel by Gallery Mungyo. And the interesting thing is they look almost exactly the same, right? You see how they're long, skinny, and it says semi-hard pastel, but you see how they're long and skinny like that? Very similar to these are long and skinny as well, but the formulation of the amount of clay versus the other binders in it are what is different. And what we're going to do here is we're going to look for colors that are similar to one another. So let's get a kind of a light blue like this. So I'm going to put this sort of a Delft blue. You see how quickly the color comes off of there? And then here's something similar. So in terms of the way that they work on the paper, just as a pastel, they work the same way. This is a regular soft pastel, but this one is the one that we're going to be able to get wet, and I'll show you that in just a moment. And then here is a different brand. Oh, this is also Monet. I like this one. I actually bought this one off of Whatnot. And because they're nice small pieces, as you can see, they're little half pieces, a good set to travel with as well, student grade as opposed to the Sennelier professional grade. And let's get a color that looks similar. Not exactly the same, but similar. I don't see one that's the same. So let's put this one in the middle here. So they come off the same way when you're applying them onto the paper. The difference is going to be if you hit them with water. So let's go ahead and hit this one in the middle here. Now, as I'm working with pastels and water, I always have a paper towel handy because you're going to be wiping off the paper towel onto the paper towel often. So this is the Monet Student, these right here, like that. And you see how you can move the color around. So yes, you can use water. Oftentimes people also will use alcohol because it dries faster than water. But I found alcohol works fine with these regular soft pastels to liquefy them and then they dry fast, but it doesn't work well with these Charvin that are designed for water. Okay, so that was the Monet Student. Now notice how this one is not releasing the color very nicely, is it? And why is that? That's because those are hard, semi-hard, they're called. So this is a regular pastel. This is a semi-hard pastel. These were the semi-hards. It says right on it, semi-hard pastel. And so it's not going to release as much powder. It's not going to release as much pigment there. And then here is the Charvin. Wow. And it's not going to, from my experience, it doesn't completely release the pigment, but it acts more like your regular soft pastel in terms of giving off color. You see how the color came off of there? And you can work with it. And what happens is it produces a pigment that when it's dry, it is almost completely like it won't come up. Once it's dry, the color, it's semi-permanent, I would call it. It's not absolutely permanent, but it's semi-permanent. And let me show you over here. This is the hard pastel. So I did a little cherry using those semi-hards, these right here. So I used the semi-hard and I made a little cherry and then I put water on it. And now when I take my finger, which should be dry, let's see here. And now I've got a lot of color on there. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a lot of color came off of there onto my finger. Now this was the student grade Monet. So these are what I would call regular pastels. So this was the student grade Mungyo that I put here, and I used water. Oh, let's get those back in there. And let me clean off my finger, like that. So my finger's clean. And when I come into here, there's a lot of pigment that comes off of there. Even though I got it wet, and I was able to create a soft background that way, which is a technique that a lot of pastel artists use. So don't think that just because you have regular pastels, you can't use water. You can, but what'll happen is that it doesn't stick very well to the surface afterwards. But I can go back over top of this and use the pastel on top. I've created a background. Just realize that this background is going to be dusty and it's going to release its color. Then with the Charvin, this is the beginning of a piece that I did with Charvin, and I'm creating a background again with the water before I put the dry pastel on top. And now let me get a clean finger here, and almost nothing comes off. And that's the difference between using the Charvin pastel with water and other pastels with water, the regular soft pastels, is that this doesn't, it doesn't mess up once it's dry. It's set on the paper, which is terrific. It's fantastic if you want to do mixed media, because I can create a soft background, and if I want to, I can go back over top of this with acrylic paints and the color stays in place. So I like to use these to create my finished artworks, but also to create backgrounds like this. And that's a mixed media approach to it. All right, let me put these aside and let's make something. Let's make something. Let's do the apple over here. So this was the same paper as this, but I put the ground on it. Actually, I used this one, the golden pastel ground. So this has the pastel ground, which means that it has an acrylic layer of paint over top of it, and it should take these beautifully. Now, what I can start my artwork either directly with the pastels, or I can use a pencil. Remember how I said I like to sometimes sketch with a pencil? So if you do need to sketch, you can use a pencil like this, and notice I'm holding it loosely. I'm not holding it like a pencil, although you can. And I just want to get my apple here. The nice thing about using a pencil, of course, is once you have your shape, if you want to erase anything, you can actually use the regular white eraser and just erase it. Okay, that's the beautiful thing about using a pencil of some sort. Let's do this. And then we have our apple coming over here. Okay, this could actually, it could be an orange, it could be an apple, it could be just about anything. Okay, let's do this. And then, of course, we're going to have a stem here. And then we're going to have a leaf coming off this way. Now, you might not be able to see the drawing because it's very light. There you can see the drawing, but that's why I like to use a pencil often. And then let's just, I know normally our our apples don't come with a leaf, but hey, I wanted to put a leaf on it. And I'm an artist, so I'm allowed to do that, right? So now I've got a sketch here. You don't, like I said, you don't have to do a sketch to start. Now, what if I used charcoal to do my sketch instead? Let's do what I normally do, which is take a soft charcoal. And then, so I'm going to sketch in with the charcoal. You see how much heavier that is? Oh, yeah. It gives you that very bold sort of line there. Love it. Love it. See, I like bold lines. But besides using one of these, and hey, you can even do it like the way that I just did, which was a combination of draw it out with a pencil so that you can erase if you want to, and then afterwards, whew, afterwards go ahead and use your charcoal over top of it if you want to outline it. Here's a little apple that I have, which is kind of what I like to use as my inspiration, right? Right there. So this is called a still life, where you take your item that you're going to be drawing or painting, and you set it in front of you, and that gives you a direction that you can go in, or you take a picture of it. Okay, so here we go. Now we're going to start with there. Normally, when I paint, I'm painting with a mid-tone, a dark, and a light. That's most of the time what the technique that I use. So I like to start with my mid-tones and then darken areas that need to be darkened and highlight areas that need to be lightened. The only thing that you have to consider with that is where you're going to do your highlight. So let's say that our highlight is over here. When I do the highlight, I don't want to put as much paint in the highlight area. So for instance, here, I didn't even put any paint in that one spot right there, right? And so consider that ahead of time as you're doing it. Whoops, there's a little bit of a pencil line outside here that I'm going to get off. Now, if I did mess up on that charcoal, remember that with charcoal, I can go in with a kneaded eraser and I can pick up bits just by pressing on it with the kneaded eraser. And that's how you pick up and erase something if you're using your pastel or charcoal. Okay, so let's go ahead and do our mid-tone green for the leaf. So out of the greens that I have here, I'm going to pick up mid-tones. So I've got are my mid-tones. So let's pick maybe this one. There we go. Oh, is everything working okay? Yep, there, we're back. Something happened on my computer. So I'm going to take this mid-tone and I'm just going to put it in here and put it on the leaf. Again, if there's an area of the leaf that I want to have be very light, be that highlight, I might not put the color on there. So here we go. Nice. So there's my mid-tone. Now there is dust. These are going to produce dust just like any regular pastel. And so when I'm working with these, normally I am on a slant like this. I have them on a what is that thing called? I have them up this way. And as I'm working on it, the dust falls down. I use gravity for that. But right now we're working flat, so we're going to end up with dust. And there are a couple ways to deal with dust. One is you take your paper towel and you spray a mist, just a light mist of water on it. Easel, thank you. Thank you, Crazy Junk Art. I have a bunch of them. So what I did was I just took a little bit of water on there and I just did that to pick up some of the dust. That's one way that I pick up dust. Another way that I pick up dust or that I dust off is I just tap like this and then that will get the dust off. Another way is to, you guys are going to love this. I just bought this. It's an artist desktop vacuum from Faber-Castell. What? Apparently these have been out for a long time, but I only was introduced to it recently by my friends at David Art Supply in New Orleans. I was reading their email and I said, what the heck? So this has batteries. I put batteries in it and it's a little desktop vacuum. So you can just press the button and it'll turn on. And then I gently go over top of the work like this and it picks up the little bits. How cool is that? This is awesome. I'm in love with it. Okay. That's another way. that I make sure that I'm getting the immediate dust off. Okay. They they say don't blow it, and I know why. You don't want to blow on it because it puts the dust up into the air and then it can get in your lungs, and you don't want the dust getting in your lungs. But sometimes I just pick it up like this and go and give it just a little blow and get it off of there. But that works better when you're in an area where you have a fan going or something so that it's not going to go directly into your lungs. All right, let's go into this part here. I'm going to start up here, this little divot, right? This little divot area. Do you see how there's a little bit of yellow in there? So we're going to take this darker yellow and we're going to go inside the divot a little bit. Right now, all I'm doing is creating a background. I'm going to later go on top of it and add in more detail. So I'm just laying a little bit of that in there. Now the browns for the stem here are over in here. So I'm just going to use a little bit lighter brown, like that. There we are. And then back to here, mid-tone. I want my mid-tone red, right? Which maybe is an orange. Let's see, or maybe it's a pink. Ooh, this one's pretty. That one looks like a mid-tone. Now, it's kind of a mid-tone pink. Let's see. Let's do a mid-tone orange because we have a light orange here and we have a dark orange and reds here. So let's do this mid-tone orange. Now, if I want to fill this area, I can use the end like this and fill the area like this. Or what I do often, you see little pieces in here. So do not be afraid to break it to the size that you need, because it's going to work just as well whether it's broken or not broken. And the nice thing about breaking it is you can use it on its side and you can cover the area more quickly. So I often will break mine. Now I'm leaving a little bit of area here with no color because that's going to be my highlights. But this is my mid-tone. All right. And it looks kind of orangey, but don't worry about it. There is some orange in here. We're going to build it up to red. So we've got our mid-tone. Now, what you might notice is as I use my colors, I leave them propped out. Do you see this? So if you get it in a box like this, then you can prop them as you're using them, and then that'll tell you which pieces you're using. The reason that I do that is I don't want to take them necessarily out of the box because I've got my nice order here. If I do take them out of the box, I can put them back in order using my reference card as well. All right, but most of the time I just prop them like that. Let's go with something slightly darker. Ooh, why don't we do something fun and go with like a middle pink like this, like a dark pink, why not? I'm gonna break it again. There we go. So if you receive a box of pastels and some of them are broken, don't worry about it. That's exactly what you're gonna end up doing anyway. You're gonna end up breaking the pieces so they can be in the right size for you to work with. Okay. Remember, I'm creating my background, so I'm just throwing a little bit of pink in here. So the pink and orange, it doesn't have to be exactly like the orange, but as I'm moving my hand, I'm stroking the pastel in the direction that the apple would go, right? Because the apple is round. So I can either go around this way, like this, or I can go around this way like that. But you want to give that impression of the roundness. Do you see that there? Now, let me put this here, and I am ready for water. Water! So let's go ahead. I'm going to hold my, oh, you see how there was still blue in there? Let's get that blue out of there. Let me bring this over here to the fresh water. Okay, so I'm going to get the blue out. You see why I'm constantly wiping on my paper towel so I know what's going on. And I'm actually going to start with the green up here. I usually do my lighter colors first. So I'm liquefying the pastel here and creating a background. And then getting the green off and getting a little more water. And I'm going to do this little yellow area up here. Don't worry about the charcoal. Even if the charcoal sort of melts into what you're doing, that's fine. You can always cover up the charcoal later with a layer of pastel. And then here, I'm going to do the brown. So the reason that I'm adding the water is I want this background color to attach itself to the background and then not lift. So I'm just creating a background. And the fact that there's dust on here, there's a whole bunch of dust on here. It doesn't matter because this is my background and I'm going to be applying water to it. So that does not matter in the least at all. Oh, this is so fun. Thank you for spending your afternoon, your Sunday afternoon with me. Okay, here we go. This blends so beautifully. Oh my gosh. It is just gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. Now, because I didn't tap my brush as soon as I took it out of the water the last time, there's a big old puddle of water there. So I'm going to lift a little bit of that off. And you can see I lifted some of the color off and it's lightening. So the nice thing about doing this water part is that you can actually do it several times. So I'm doing it now and getting it wet. I can go in with a second layer and get that wet. I can go in with another layer and get that wet. It's so cool. So cool. I'm also liquefying the charcoal just a little bit, so I'm getting some good shadows on the edges. That makes me very happy. And then I left the white area there where there's going to be the highlight, right? Now, of course, this takes a few minutes for it to get dry, and you can hit it with a heat gun. That's not going to hurt anything. All right, let's move a few things so I can get my heat gun out. And so often I'll help it along by using a heat gun because if it's wet, let me show you what happens when it's wet. So if it's wet and you go back in, so let me get a little bit darker color here. If it's wet, so it's still damp and you go back in, it's the nice thing about these pastels because they're designed to get wet, it's not going to hurt a thing even if this is wet. What will hurt is if your paper cannot take scraping when it's wet. And this paper did not like the scraping when it was wet. It still looks good. There's just a little bit of fuzz there, but I can't really go in hard with many layers on this piece because the surface isn't allowing me to when I went wet back into wet like that, or dry into wet, where because I put the ground, I used a pastel ground on this one, I can bang on it and it's going to let me do it, which has been fantastic. Now you can also get this wet. So I can literally dip it in the water like that. And now while it's wet, I can come in here and apply it wet, which is really fun too, to apply it wet. You get a little bit different feel for it when you do that. And you can also take a brush. So I can use a brush that's damp like this. Oop, let me not have it be overflowing. And I could leave these inside the box and just pick up the color like this and then paint it right on my surface like that. So you truly can use these like a watercolor stick. Just think of it as a watercolor stick, but it's also a pastel. There we go. Oh, I just love how deep it gets when you put it on the wet. It just gives it a different a different depth of look. Can you see that? Wow. You see how it's really deep in there? I'm loving that. Love, love, love it. Oh my gosh. Now, as I say, once this is dry, it's semi-permanent. So if you want to relift some of the color, let's say that I decide, ooh, it's a little heavy and I don't want it quite so dark. Make sure that you don't let it dry completely. I just added some more water and now I'm going to lift some of the color. See how a lot of the color comes back out? So if you're familiar at all with watercolor painting, oftentimes that's what you're doing with watercolor. You're putting color down and then saturating and lifting parts of it back up in order to get that, what I call a push-pull when you're painting. And that's exactly what I did here. I was able to lift up a bunch of that color. And so now I lightened that area. But once it's dry, I found that you get minimal lifting. You can't really lift a lot of the color once this is on there and it's been wet and it's dried. Okay? So think of it like a watercolor, but it comes in a chalk form. Okay. Now this little area up here that's yellow, we're going to have to put a little bit of the orange or red up in there. Let's put a little bit of red up in there. So now what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to use a small brush. Oops, I need more paper towels. I'm going to use a small brush. Oh, y'all, this is so much fun. And you know what is amazing? This set of Charvin, 48 colors, it's only like $22 for the set. And it's so much fun to play with. I would recommend if you want to play with these, if you want to get a set and play with them, that you buy the set and then you buy one of the primers. Because that way you can take whatever paper you already have at home and just put layers of this fixative or this pastel ground on it, and then you can do exactly what I'm doing here, and it is so much fun. Oh my gosh. It's what I call that push pull, push pull. So there we go. Nice, 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 nice. Because you want this area to be a little bit darker. So if I want a little more paint, I'm just going to come in here and grab it off of there and then dab it in here. Nice. It is coming along. Now let's do something else with the leaf up here. If you see this one, this I did get wet, and then I came back in with a couple more layers of color there. So this is now dry. There's no paint coming off on my fingers. Oop, a little bit of red got up there. So what am I going to do? I'm going to use this, and I'm just going to lift it right off. Ah, it's a miracle. I love my kneaded I love my kneaded erasers. You think I have a little fun when I'm painting like this? Oh my gosh. Hey there, Sarah Noel. Welcome in, welcome in. Okay, and let's go ahead and do a little more work on the leaf. So what I'll do is when I have a larger painting, I'll work on certain areas so that the other area can dry while I'm working in another area. And that way, if this area is still wet, I can come up here and work on this area that's now dry. So let me put a darker color in the middle like this. I'm actually gonna put a little bit of the darker color on the stem too. And then there's my center. And I want a little bit of darkness down here where the leaf meets the stem. And then I want a little bit of darkness in this area right here. So this is where you just play. You're playing with your lights and your darks. Normally on the leaf, it's either light in just off of the center or it's light on the edges. Now there's also lightness generally at the tip of your leaf right here. So I'm taking some of this yellow and I'm adding it in right here. It's going to be blended in, so I'm not worried if it looks too jarring right now. And let's say that the lightness is up at the top there. Okay, do you see where we are there? And now I'm going to grab one of my stumps. Now, just so that you know the difference. This is wrapped paper, but it's flat on the end and it has your layers here. This is called a tortillon. It's also for blending. And then this is called a blending stump. So, and just to let you know that there is some terminology there between the two. And if somebody says something about a tortillon, this is what they're talking about. But they're both, this is compressed paper, this is wrapped paper. That's it. You're going to take both of them, and to clean off the tip, you're going to be using them on your um, sandpaper. Okay. So your sandpaper paddle or just a piece of sandpaper like this. And that's how you're going to clean those tips. So right now I'm going to use this one. And they come in, did I show you before? They come in all these different sizes. So let me show you. So see these? Lots of different sizes. So let me take this middle size right here. And now I can use this to feather that out. Feather it a little bit, blend it. That's why it's called a blending stump. Now, there are little bits on there. You can't see it from here, but there are little bits of dust. So that's where I like to use these tools, this one in particular with that little skinny tip to it, because what I do is I go in with the skinny tip and I don't pull, I tap, 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 tap. And when I tap, what happens is it pushes the particles onto the surface. Tap, 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 like that. Okay, cool. So that helps when you have dust. Instead of trying to get rid of the dust, you can tap the dust and tap it down into the surface. These are awesome. I love my soft tools. Okay, like that. Let's see here. I'm actually blending a little bit. Tap, 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 tap. Okay. Now, I could be totally crazy. I don't have to make an apple that looks like this. Let's get some purple in there. What the heck? Let's put some pink in the leaf. Pink or orange. Maybe put some of this bright orange in the leaf. Why not? Because, you know, we're an artist and we can do whatever we want, right? So let's put some of this orange in this leaf for the heck of it, because I'm feeling frisky. All right, just for something different. I like to periodically think, what can I do that'll be outside the box? Because, you know, plenty of people know how to do realism, which is to take something and then make a realistic picture of it. But what's more rare is to step outside the box and do something other than what you see in front of you. So let's take some of the purple. And let's use purple as our shadow here, like this at the bottom. Okay, we'll put a little bit of purple in it. Oh, I like the colors. I like it. I like it. Now I do have a lot of dust there, so I'm going to come back in with this. Oops. And I'm just going to tap, 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 tap that dust in. All right. Nice. Now the little bit of extra that's there, I'm going to use this guy. And I just set it down and then set it down. Now there are little whisker things on the bottom here. And so you want to try not to get them in too much dust. So when I set them down, I try to set them down so they're in an area where they won't pick up a lot of dust. And then you can even wipe them to be sure that it's not picking up dust. Hey there, Pooh My Pants Queen. How you doing? All right, oh, this ground is just beautiful. These pastel grounds, they are just gorgeous. Okay, so we're getting there, somewhere a little different. Now I really want to pump it up because I'm feeling totally frisky here. So let's get another pink. Why not? Let's throw some pink in there. Oh, the nice thing is with pastel, you're just going to be building layers. Layer, layer, layer. If you don't like a layer, you just pick the layer up like this And then you just put something else on top of it. No fuss, no muss. I kind of like the purple better, so let me bring more of the purple back in here. Now, there's also something that I like to do. So see, I'm pushing it in there with my paper towel, is I like to use um, pastel pencils to do detail work. So let me get my pastel pencil holder here. Ta-da! So these are called Carbothello. They are, yeah, I see you changed your username instead of Fart Queen. Um, so these are pastel, but in pencil form, so you can do more detail work. And they're called Carbothellos. I do have them linked on my website under supply links. This is the pack that I recommend that you get, the 48 pack. Of course, there's a 24 pack and a 12 pack, but I just found for the selection of colors, I I waited till I found it on a good sale and then I bought the 48. You know, use a coupon or whatever, but do yourself a favor, and I love the set of 48. Gives you more color options. So let's take this dark green of the pencil, the Carbothello pencil, and come in here, and I'm going to redraw that line again. Oh, see how bold that is? Yes. So now I've got the purple, I've got the pink and the orange and the leaf, and now I'm adding that line. And now I'm going to come in and I'm going to add the little part, these other little parts of the leaf like this. Oh, maybe I'll only do one half of it. What do you think? There you go, like that. But I love using the pencils for getting those details. Even in the stem right here, let's say that I want to put a little, what the heck? Why don't I put a little bit of orange on the stem? And so where the light would be, I'm going to come on with a little bit of orange just for the heck of it, because I'm feeling like it. So I just use the pencil. And that's the great thing about the pencil, is you can come in here and do some really fun extra highlighting. And okay, you can add those little extra marks a little more precisely with a pencil. And the pencil is still pastel, so you can, as I'm doing here, you can still use your tools to, if you decide, ooh, I didn't like that, you can push it back or lift it up. You can even lift it up using your kneaded eraser like this, because remember, that part that I got wet in the background is not going to lift anymore. So you see all of this orange that lifted there? Let's try lifting some of this that was wet. Barely anything, barely anything came off of there, which is exactly what I want. I want it to stay in, that's my background. I want my background to stay in place so that that way I can put dry color on top and scrub it and lift it and do all kinds of fun stuff. And my base is going to stay. And I love that. Okay, let's do a little bit more in here. Let's see what time it is. Okay, good, good, good. Let me use this dark. I want to use this dark right up here in the top. And then remember how I said you can come back in with your charcoal? So I'm going to come back in with my hard charcoal pencil, and I'm just going to add a little bit of definition to this top right here. Right, so I just added a little bit of black in there, and that's what the charcoal pencils are good for. And now let's get a little more crazy in here. I'm going to move the pencils out of the way, but I love my pencils for my details. Oh my gosh, they're the best. And let's go back into the orange and see what we can do there. Now, like I said, I couldn't do very many layers here on this one because the paper wasn't allowing me to, right? Even though it's a paper that's supposed to be able to get wet, that was not working well. And so with this one, with having the pastel ground on it, it got wet. It's sweet perfection. And now we can build more layers on top because there's still, here it's very rough. Here it's moderately rough. So it's still rough. It's just not as rough as up here. So let's see what other colors we have in here that we might be able to incorporate. Let me see where we are. Okay, good. You can still see that. Excellent. Um, then let's play around with this. If there's a color that you want me to try in the apple, shout it out. I mean, what the heck? Let's use some of this fun blue. Ooh, this blue right here is like a gray blue, is beautiful. So let's use a little bit of gray blue up in here. Why not? Just, yeah, like I said, I like to challenge myself to step outside of the box and use colors that you might not normally think to use. So let's use this gray blue in here. And then let's use this sort of almost turquoisey blue in here as well, sort of around the outside. And then we'll come back to the middle. We'll use some more pink. Let's get a deeper, oh, let's try this pink right here. And what? I want to do some going this way to give the feel of it being rounded, right? Like that. Now, I am going to use my finger right now. And I'm just going to get a little bit of dust in that highlight so that the highlight is not quite so white. I want to incorporate a little bit of dustiness into there. So yeah, it's lighter, but it's being incorporated into the surface. Now, like I said, if I put something down and I say, ooh, that's ugly, ugly, then what do? I just take my kneaded eraser. Hey there, Deco Painter and Tea, welcome in over on YouTube. Okay, I'll throw some yellow in there. I see you were saying. So I can take my kneaded eraser, and if I say, ooh, it's that simple. You just pick it up. Oh my gosh. Can you tell? I just love doing this. It makes me laugh. Now this one has red on it. You see how there's red on this tool? If if I there but look at this side. There's nothing, no color on that side. So if I wanted to, I could flip this over like this and then jiggle it on. And now I have a clean side that I can use. And I'm going to take some of this blue and incorporate it into there. So the reason that I said that I do layer, 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 I keep building layers until I'm happy with the finished result. And so that's why I end up most of the time with 10, 12, 15 layers on my pieces. My really crazy ones, I have like 20 layers on them just because I'm playing and pushing and pulling and pushing and pulling and laying down color and pulling color back off. Okay, there's some little spots right there. Let's put some yellow in as was requested. Let's go back to this yellow that I used up here on the leaf. It can be helpful when you're working on a design if you use the same color in more than one place. Some artists say you want to use it in at least 3 places. But let's take a look here. We'll put some, for sure, there's some yellow. And the interesting thing about these apples is that they're little dots. I don't know if you can see it right there, but they're actually little dots of color there. And so, yes, I could bring this yellow and throw some dots in there. Let's see how it's doing in here. Or I could break it and take the broken part and throw in some, oh, let's see, the highlight is over here, right? So pretty. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Deco. I appreciate that. So you see I'm throwing in some highlight by doing that there. And I'm using the side instead. So you can get some really cool looks by using the side. And then now I'm going to blend that yellow in just a little bit. See, what happens is sometimes, depending on the colors and how they blend and how they mix, sometimes when you go back in to use your blending tool, you may actually lose it, like the effect that you were going for. But if you like the effect, you just add it again. Just put more on. Okay, let's use something like this over here. I needed something just a little bit more dramatic over in this area. Push, pull, pouncing, 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 right? Just to bring a little more attention and drama to this area. I want some more red in this area. So I haven't actually used the red yet. You notice how these are all up off of the side, which means I've used them. But this one, the red, I haven't used yet. So I'm going to grab this little piece of red and let's darken this a little bit. Oh yeah. Yeah. Loving that. Because this side over here is going to be my darker side, right? The light's over here, so this side is going to be darker. So your pastels don't have to be all smooth. That's the beautiful thing. You're using your hands and you're moving things around and you're using your artistic license and creating this unique one of a kind piece. So now I've got some yellow over here and some more red. You see the strokes of red? Actually, I took a pastel class once where the person said the whole painting you should do like you're stroking it with a brush, and that means turning your hand all around like I just was in different directions and touching it like this as opposed to stroking it like that. So let's do a little bit more. Now, you know what I noticed I haven't done yet is I haven't worked on the shadow. So the shadow often includes some of the color of the actual fruit itself. So in this case, we're going to add the shadow color here, the red. And then it usually gets lighter as it goes out. So let's take a lighter red and put a lighter red around the outside of it like this. And then directly on the inside here, we can either use purple, we can use a dark gray. So here's a dark gray. You're going to have something that's a little more dark right up next to the fruit there. Right? That's normally a little darker. And this is what it looks like in a pastel-y, loose sort of way. But what am I going to do? I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to go in here and I'm going to hit it with some water because I can. And then that way it just becomes another mixed media layer. All right, let's take some of that brown off. And then I'll be able to build another layer right on top of it after it's dry. That just gives me a nice soft sort of, yes, nice. Because usually I use blues and purples in my shadows, but I'm starting with the color of the fruit first. And then there's still a little color on here, so I'm just going to pull like a very pale shadow out that way. There we go. So now we've got, and I'm going to push that. Remember, this is not quite dry yet, so I can soften the edges just like I would with a watercolor. Oh, there you go. Now you've got a shadow starting, right? But once it's dry, I will come back in and I will use some of these paints in order to give it that pastel painterly look. You know what? I want to go heavier on the yellow and the orange over here. So why don't I get a lemon yellow just for the heck of it? And instead of breaking it, I'm just going to use the tip. And let's just, oh, yes. Oh, yeah. There we go. That makes me happier. There we go. That I think is the same yellow or similar yellow that I used in the leaf up here. Okay. And let's put some more of this mid-tone orange right here. Hey, Annie Z, welcome in, welcome in. So let's take this one. You can already see it's worn on the side there. And I'm going to use it in a painterly fashion and throw some orange in there like this. All right. I think that we have finished the apple for now. Of course, I can come back. There's a lot of dust on there, so I can use my little trusty, there we go, vacuum right there. Oh yeah, that took most of the dust right off. Nice. There we go. Oh, I'm in love with this. I just opened it yesterday. My new best friend. Okay, so there's a little bit here of straggling and a little straggling here. Now, of course, I can leave this beautiful paper for the background, or I can put a little bit of color in the background. And to do the little bit of color, this is a Derwent. Derwent makes pencils and color sticks, and this is what they call a sprinkler. So I looked for this online. I could not find it. Um, I bought this a while ago, but it's really cool with what it does with the pastels. These pastels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover up the apple. I'm going to cover up the basics of the apple right there. And I just want to sprinkle a little bit of color in the background here. So I'm first going to wet it. Let's take this and wet down the background. Remember, I put acrylic medium pastel ground on the background so I can get it wet. And then let's take like a sky blue color here, just something sort of fun. And you can use any sort of little grater that you have to do this. But I'm creating a speckled sky. This is so fun, y'all. You want to make sure it's wet. Some of this is dry, so I'm going to spray it a little bit more with the water to be sure that it all gets wet. There's a little bit more up here. I need to spray it. Oops, I lost some of it. So let's do a little more of a sprinkle here. See if I can direct it a little bit more. So you get this very interesting speckled finish. Now what I'll do is when that's dry, I will lay my paper towel down in another area and I'll cover it, and then I'll put some sprinkle here, and then I'll put some sprinkle in here. I'll just keep covering it until I get the sprinkle where I want it. But there's a little bit of extra there. I'm going to see if I can pick it up with my paper towel, a big chunk, right? There we go. I'll just leave it as a sprinkle. But you see how you can get a soft sprinkle in the background with that? That's by using a little grater. So just some sort of little mesh and then scraping over the mesh into the wet. But only with these Charvin. With the regular ones, it won't do it. It's just because of the nature of the Charvin is a little more mixed media. Okay, so there we go. And yes, I normally will come in with my pencils. Oh, thanks for the hearts. I appreciate it. I normally will come in with my pencils and do some more just fun. Now you can see a lot of beautiful little strokes with the small chunks. but often I will come in and then I'll do something more with the pencil, and I'll get some more lines and more going across here. The more you can do to give the shape of the item, the better it is for the far away, the overall view far away. So I'll just come in and do some details with my pencils like that. All right, that is it for the workshop. Does anyone have any other questions, or would you like to see something else? I'll be happy to show you. Here again this was part of the picture for this workshop, and what you're going to notice is I went in with my pencil and did some of these highlight lines here. I also went in with the pencil and added in some dots for this hibiscus. And I came in and I used the pencil to do the lines on the leaves. You see that there? So that's the sort of finishing touches that you can do using those pastel pencils. All right, I'm going to clean up a little bit, and then this is going to be the giveaway tonight while I'm cleaning up. And that was the one that I completed earlier. Like I said, it has some fuzzy on here, but it is still good and beautiful, and you put it in a frame and it'll look terrific. Oh, now when you finish your artwork, and sometimes even during the process of your artwork, you may want to fix the design that you have at the time, and then build more of the soft pastel on top. In order to do that, you use a fixative. So this is my favorite, non-toxic, odor-free, meaning you can use it inside the studio, fixative. Just make sure you put your pastels away. You don't want to be spraying it on your pastels. I make sure my pastels are put away before I spray fixative. And you can spray it, this particular one, you can spray inside your studio. Then there are other ones like this that you can spray outside. These are your typical regular under pressure. This one is by Sennelier for soft pastels, and this one is by Krylon, and it says workable fixative for pencil, pastel, and chalk drawings. So a lot of artists at certain times of during the process of their painting, they may spray some fixative on it so that they can build more layers. Remember I was saying how I build and build and build more layers? So I do use fixative to help me build my layers. And then there's a controversy when you're finished, should you spray it with fixative? And that depends on the artist. Some artists do not like the fact that fixative may darken your colors when you spray it on. And so if you've taken hours and hours and done beautiful work, you don't necessarily want to have the colors of your piece darken or change when you spray the fixative on. Now, I prefer this non-toxic Degas fixative, and the reason it has cows on the label is because it's a casein derivative, meaning it comes from cows. And what I found is that when I use this Degas fixative, I have minimal change in color, absolute minimum. And I have already used the Degas fixative on this piece. I sprayed one layer. I will spray a second layer before I mail it out. But this is today's giveaway. And when I store my pastels, because if I take my finger and I put it on here right now, a whole bunch of pastel comes off, right? So you have to, if you don't fix them, which a lot of artists do not put fixative on their finished product, then you need to store them in a way that they will not get the dust all off of them. So I do have an example here of a piece that I have done. Let me find it. Hold on. Oh, the thunder's starting. The storms are going to start soon here. Okay, so here is a finished pastel. Oh, sorry about that, y'all. Here's a piece of finished pastel painting. Now, the colors aren't bright because they're sitting behind something called glassine. So before I put the artwork inside the plastic bag, the permanent bag for it to ship in, I use something called glassine on it. So glassine is acid free and it's similar to a parchment paper. Now I have it like this. I've bought it in packs like this where they're sheets, or you can also get it on a roll. So I also have a roll here in my studio. But you can see that is what you put on top of your painting, and then you slide it into your bag. And that way it holds the pastel, the smudgy pastel in place. Now, you can, there was something else I was going to show you. You can, if you don't have any glassine and you just did a piece, you can use parchment paper. So this is parchment paper, and this one happens to be parchment and foil, but it is the regular parchment paper does not have wax in it, because sometimes I use wax paper as well, but you don't really want wax for a long period of time sitting against your painting because that's not archival. But this parchment paper can be a good alternative to put on top of your painting and then slide it in the bag, and that helps to protect it. The only thing is that the reason that I like using glassine is that you can see the artwork underneath it. If you use wax paper, you can also see the artwork underneath it, but I don't really like wax against my artwork. If you use parchment paper, often it's a little bit more dense and you can't see your artwork underneath it as well. And that's why I like using the glassine, because you can still see what your piece of artwork looks like underneath there. And then that's how I store them. I put them in glassine and then I put them in their storage bag. All right, so that's what I will do with this piece when it's done. And this one, that's how I will ship it to you as well. So I appreciate everybody who has come.